Alrighty, so what I got today is the 100% correct, perfectly accurate Shadows of the Galaxy leader tier list. Obviously, that's not true. What I have here is my very early impressions of the leaders in Shadows of the Galaxy. I'm going to go through some tiers that I've ranked them in, but primarily the idea here is just to talk about these leaders and give you my thoughts on how I'm going to approach deck building with them, or if I will even bother trying it first. Obviously, the set just dropped. A lot of this is in flux. My opinions can change drastically from week to week based on testing, but this is how my initial impressions look, and we are going to dive right in. This is tier no, and these are the three leaders on it. I'm going to start with Hunter. Hunter, I don't understand. He does not appear to be built for set 2. It looks like maybe this is a plant for future sets. His ability is extremely difficult to pull off unless you can stack a bunch of named characters. Like once we can play 9 copies of different Wreckers, then his ability can turn on pretty quickly. Right now, that can't really happen. The most you got is 3 copies of a card, and potentially if they match the name of a leader, it turns it on a little more, but it ends up being just like a really clunky draw card, and I think even if it was more actively turned on, it still might be too clunky. Like we know Cassian is a 1-cost draw that is much easier to turn on than this and still isn't very good. He's a 5/8 overwhelm. That's pretty beastly for a 7 deploy. But I just don't see him as made for this set yet. I don't think there's much to do with him. Finn, you blow up your upgrades to put on shields. We know the value of a shield is approximately 1 resource. The Makard Moment of Peace costs 1 and puts a shield. So you don't really want to blow up upgrades that you spent resources on. So really you're thinking about blowing up experience, I think. Turning an experience into a shield. He goes infinite with Rose, like the slowest infinite ever, right? But technically infinite. Other than that, like Wing Leader puts 2 experiences on something. You could like blow one of them up. I think this ability is pretty bad, actually. He is a 4/6 for 5 deploy, which is pretty strong. But I don't think there's really much excitement about building around him. And as for Fennec, ambush is really good, but stacking 1 cost to enable ambush is not as good. The cap on 4 cost units, not great, especially if you're going to try to go later into a game and make those ambush units more impactful. And the real kicker is that she's a 5 cost 4/4. I don't think that's a death sentence depending on the kind of leader you're playing and like the kind of strategy, but she really needs to stay in play because her action when she's in play is actually valuable, where you no longer have to pay 1 to give your units ambush. But she's a 4/4 that needs to stay in play, and that's not really going to happen much. And I just don't know if there's like enough to build around here. I mean, there's already just decent ambush units that cost 4, like the modded cohort. There's a 2-cost Cloud Rider. Like, do you really need to give your 3 drops ambush and make them cost 4? Does that really make you win games? I don't think so, personally, and I think she's kind of a dud. All right, this is tier unlikely. So, basically, I don't think these leaders are going to crack into competitive play for various reasons. Hondo, for instance, I don't think he's worthless. I just don't think we got enough value smuggle plays. Like, think of like the Starhopper, which is a 2/2 ship for 2 in green that has smuggle for 3. That's the kind of card that I think actually would push Hondo forward, right? Because then for 3 you can get a 3/3 ship, which is not embarrassing, or you could get a 2/2 ship, throw an experience on something. And notably, when you smuggle it, it didn't cost you a card, so it kind of drew you a card. And that's a pretty strong play. It's a pretty good value play. I just don't think we got enough of that, and especially to make up for the fact that he's a very weak 6-cost deploy. He's a 3/7 raid 1 for 6, which is not a good body, and he doesn't really do anything when he's in play that's special. Um, I could see like a specific kind of world where it's all about attrition and like he's a little better in attrition because those attrition smuggle plays are going to be a little bit better in his deck because of the throwing the experience. I just don't really think that's what the world's going to end up looking like, and I'm not really focusing on Hondo right now. Bo-Katan I actually think is a strong leader, like as far as like her ability and her unit side, right? The free pings, well, they're not completely free. They require a little setup, but they don't cost resources. And like on her flip, the double ping, that's kind of like a Vader attack. Unfortunately, my issue with her is that I think this really lends itself into like a mid-rangey unit-based control kind of strategy where you're like fighting fairly and attacking units and then pinging other units and you're trying to clear the board with your like value trades. And I don't know how that fits into a world where like Boba tempo mid-range stuff can just kind of run through you, and are you going to be quick enough to beat really low to the ground aggro, and what are you ever going to do into control decks that don't really fight on those terms and don't really mess with like value trading. And that's, I think, where the weakness is. I think our most powerful deck might just not be a very meta-defining archetype. On top of that, the Mandalorians themselves, I don't think we got enough pushed ones to really want to be building a deck full of them. And I think that's what leaves her a little bit behind. Lando, my issue with Lando is that he needs to be built aggro, right? He's blowing up your own resources. He's a 4-cost deploy, and I just don't think he's going to be better than Sabine. I don't think he's going to be better than Red Han. Basically, I think his whole game plan kind of falls apart if he doesn't Falcon you on turn 3. And it's just not super consistent. He only attacks for 2. It's not great. I like the ability in a sense. Like I like this like high cost, high reward thing. I just don't think we got enough high reward to make him really shine. As for Moff Gideon, this falls in a similar camp to Bo-Katan. We've got a very unit-based control ability. You bump your weaklings with 1 attack. They trade better, which is cool. It's just, it doesn't always make for relevant game states. Like if the +1 is not relevant on any turn, you basically don't have an ability that turn. And unfortunately, that +1 doesn't come with the Overwhelm tag unless he is deployed. And I think that actually could have set this apart, because then you could have been like an aggro unit based ground control. But you're not getting that Overwhelm until he's out. He's not a great body, although it's passable. He's in a great color, right? Green Villain is good, but if we're going to be like ramping and barraging and Vadering, like there's probably just a better option than Moff Gideon. And I think he falls similarly, like I said, with Bo-Katan, with this ground-based, unit-based control stuff. I think it just like lacks firepower into control decks and lacks firepower into like Boba tempo. Like who's gonna like bounce you and have shielded units all over the place. So that's why I've got him in this tier. All right, this is the largest tier I have. It's tier maybe. Maybe's good. Okay, let's not hate on maybe. All right, number 1 here, Cad Bane. So I really like Cad Bane's ability. I love the free pinging. Like no resource cost necessary is great. It's a little inconsistent because your opponent gets to control it, but there are things that you can do to kind of play around that, especially like trading off units first, or like if you've got an ambush, you can like finish the ambush before doing the ping. That's all nice. His 6-cost deploy, although like 2/8 Ray 2 is not like transcendent in terms of strength, 8 health kind of is sometimes, which makes him a great target for things like Relentless Pursuit, where it's very unlikely he gets 1-tapped, and then he can capture something, get a shield, and that's really nice. Ideally right now, I think you pair him with Tarkin Town, because turn 1 Tarkin Town or like turn 2, like early Tarkin Town triggers where you can take control of the board really early is very strong. Okay, so why tier maybe? I spoke very highly of this, and why tier maybe is because Boba Fett exists, and I think Boba Fett is better, and I don't know where Cad Bane can squeeze in. I think it's going to be a very niche and very potentially small section where Boba Fett, where Cad Bane can be the better yellow aggro tempo mid-range deck than Boba, right? That's a very tall ask, and the one place I do see it is with red right now because of the Tarkin Town. Like, can that matter enough? Like, you take control of the board turn 1, even against something like Boba, right? Like that ping, you can blow up a Crafty Smuggler's shield, a 7 Fleet Defender's shield. You can ping turn, maybe trade turn 2. You ping the boat. Like, I mean, I almost said Boba Fett, but then I remembered Boba Fett, and basically every 3-drop now has 5 health, and Tarkin Town plus a ping doesn't kill any of those units. But whatever. There, you can concoct scenarios where you can gain control of the board early. It's just, I think Boba's going to do yellow better, and that's why we've got Cad in maybe. I've got Kylo also in maybe, and that's because I think this is going to be a very glass cannon-y shell. I think we are all in turbo aggro with Kylo. I think there's also maybe like a green Kylo, Palpatine's Return brew that we might be able to enable. Certainly he's the easiest way to enable cheating out things like Palpatine early because he's got the self-discard. But in a deck like that, his leader himself is probably less valuable because we're not playing hard aggro anymore. And then you flip him and he's 2 power? 3 power maybe, and then dies, and he doesn't do much. But in like a turbo aggro, which would probably be yellow, maybe red, mono red, you can dump your hand real fast. You can do some crazy buffs. Like the +2 on shielded units is great for squeezing damage in. I think it's going to be kind of nuts on Toro, the bounty hunter that readies if you play another bounty hunter, because you can like turn him into 5 power and then maybe get 2 attacks off with him in 1 turn. Even more power if you're going to like upgrade him with a fallen lightsaber or something. But I think there's a shell here that's just turbo aggro, but I think it's going to be very susceptible to just getting like removaled out of the game. I think it can race a Sabine deck, which could matter. And I think there's potential here, especially if we can find ways to build him to have more longevity. All right, Rey. So Rey's cool. I think that her ability is actually really strong on low-cost units, especially like hero low-cost units, like R2 being a 2/5 on turn 1 is nuts. You've got like the 1/4 Sentinel ship for 3. You've got Queel, especially in like mono blue. It's kind of a nutty card. There's just like a lot of value units that have 1 or 2 power in blue, and even like in other colors, right? Like red, you get A-Wing and Sabine, you can buff them up. Yellow, you can like buff a Leia up. Turn 1, you get a Battlefield Marine, basically. It's all like nice. The issue here is that like, what are we even doing when our opponent is playing control, when we're playing a deck like this? It's just like all about playing units and buffing units and pushing our advantage that way. Like our units probably trade effectively into our opponent's units. We've got a bunch of heal, so we're probably good into aggro. But I mean, I don't know what we do when our opponent is just playing removal on our units. We are not aggressive enough to get under control decks with a Rey build, I don't think. And we're also almost certainly not going to be able to beat them in a long game. So I don't know where she fits there. She's also probably going to be pretty susceptible to getting bounced out of the game. You're going to like turn an R2 into a 3/6 and it's going to get waylaid and you're going to be sad. Or Cunninged or Cantina Bouncered or Relentless Pursuit. Like there's just going to be a lot of stuff that can interact with this. I think it could be very much a meta call. I think there's going to be like a lot of good healing in her. Like her leader, Restore 3, is really, really good against decks that are trying to beat you with combat damage. So I don't think it's a lost cause. It's just, I think the builds have a little bit of holes in them. Gar Saxon, He suffers a little bit from like the mid-range problem that we talked about with Bo and Gideon, that like we're playing like unit-based mid-range battles, and there's decks that don't care about that, like control decks, and there's decks that mostly do it better, like Boba. But he does have a really nice niche with especially yellow right now, in my opinion, because of shielded units coming down and being buffed innately. And I think we can build him a little more aggressive than decks like Bo-Katan and Gideon because of that. And that's where I think he might have a place in the meta. Like, not like play lower to the ground. Hot Shot Blaster, for instance, being in like +3 buff with Saxon seems pretty great. Even Devotion, right? +2/+1, and then you get some heals so that you can fight off aggro. There are Snapshot Reflex is tremendous with him, +2/+1. I think playing aggressive with Gar is probably going to be the way to go. Obviously, you're not going to be as quick as Sabine, but you might be able to actually battle with her because your units are going to be more effective at taking out her units. Mando. Mando's pretty cool. I think I actually have like an idea to like maybe we like buff him up specifically, and we try to finish off games with him. We delay with our exhaust stuff. We get him into play. We play like a Mandalorian rifle and a relentless pursuit on the same turn, and like just capture 2 units. He's really big. He can carry a Darksaber too, and he's just our finisher. Like, we're playing like just kind of control and mitigation in the early game. Biggest issue again with this stuff is that it's like mostly a mid-range deck. And I think for him, maybe another barrier is that the upgrades themselves, like I basically named all the ones I kind of want to play, like Snapshot Reflexes and Hot Shot Blaster are both very good. His rifle's good, Darksaber's good. Is there more that we really want to play? I mean, there's some like in different colors. Blue, Devotion maybe, especially against aggro. Red has Heroic Resolve, which is a decent one. I think you can try mono yellow, which will really push further this like delay and stall stuff, because you've got more bounce, you've got cunning, and I think this might be a place to try the Final Showdown double yellow legendary, because Mando's big and Mando gets buffed. He can carry Darksabers. He can get shielded by Relentless Pursuit. We can maybe just get him to like 11 power and just like hit Final Showdown hit, right? So I think there's a world where that might be something to try, like a mono yellow Mando. Blue probably also has a decent chance, just because it's gonna be the color that gives us the most like additional removal. I think there's potential here, certainly for Mandalorian. Last here I've got Dr. Aphra. I think her leader ability is kind of like, it has potential to be busted, right? It's free discard into your discard pile, right? Like every turn you're doing that for free. So what are we trying to get from that? There's very little like direct synergy in this set for that. They threw in like Brutal Tradition, which is an upgrade that you can play from your discard pile. I don't think that's what we're trying to do. Palpatine's Return is a card that revives him from the discard, except yellow, green, Aphra. I mean, the only units at that point that have force would be, that are expensive, would be like Maul and Vader, and at that point we'll only get a 1 discount, and it's still like really awkward. Like, what if you discard your Palpatine's Return? There might be like 1 or 2 more, but there's not much. So the other stuff to do is look at restock, right? We try to get our deck depleted and we try to restock. I think that's something that like the Boba Blue decks do right now. Like in really long attrition games, they end their deck and then they can restock. This has a bit of a problem with Aphra, because she actually will then discard the first card on top of your deck the next turn. So to protect your restock, you would have to be restocking another restock, right? You have to always put 2 restocks back into your deck, because if you lose one of them to her discard effect, you're going to lock yourself out. So you're doing 2 restocks and then 1 or 2 other cards. But then what if the top card of your deck is the other card, and then you draw like 2 restocks for your turn? That could be a problem. So the end game state for her might be a little tricky to pull off, but I think there is true power in getting there quicker than your opponent. Additionally, her flip is actually really strong. It draws a card, 1 of 3 random, right? But if you're playing enough redundancy in like effects like removal or healing or early units or whatever it is you need at a certain time, it can be pretty strong. And I don't think it's hard at all to make her a 5/5 when she flips, which is also pretty strong, right? So where to take her? First instinct is control. I think the draw helps there. Her ability most notably does lend itself to like doing restock stuff and not so much combo-y stuff. But maybe there's other places to mess with her. I'm like unsure. Like this is one I'm very unsure on, and I need to be kind of persuaded, I guess, and see something really take off. All right, tier probably. So these are some leaders I'm definitely more interested in messing with early on. Jabba the Hutt, maybe it's a little bit of copium for me, but I really like this ability. I like free ramp. Now it's like the clunkiest of all free ramp, where you need to like use his ability first, right? That's action intensive. Then you need to defeat whatever you used it on, ideally with a unit that you had in play that survived from a previous turn, so that you don't have to spend resources to defeat that unit, because that's really the way you can like escalate and ramp. Otherwise, you do get a discount, but it won't be you have 6 resources, but you have to spend some of it to kill the unit. You're not playing like a Vader early anymore, which is what we want to do, right? We want to play Vader early. I think that's the best thing we can be doing early. Additionally, like he's free capture, and that's like a Palpatine light ability. Just he flips and is removal, right? That's strong. At 7 resources, that's quite strong. And as long as they don't immediately defeat whatever does the guarding, it can't be Jabba, unfortunately, then it enables something like Dryden Voss. And this is the first place I want to look, is with Yellow and Dryden, because I think Dryden's pretty strong, but I haven't really found a shell for him until Jabba came out. So Yellow Green. Now he's a very slow deploy, and I think as with other slow deploys like this, like Palpatine and Vader, there's going to be a very big barrier into making this competitive into Sabine or other aggro decks. I'm not sure it's going to get there. It doesn't mean it won't be an okay choice in certain weekends, right? Palpatine and Vader have both been able to win some events, either by like dodging some Sabine or spiking a batch against Sabine, and Jabba might fall in that same category. If we're playing with Yellow, we do get access to a little bit of more interaction. Things like No Good to Me Dead can stall. Frozen and Carbonite, it's probably the best kind of shell for that card, because you don't get much innate removal in green yellow outside of like Barrage. Strike True is another card to look at, especially there's a 3-cost Bounty Hunter that's a 4/3 that comes into play with a shield if your opponent's units have a bounty on it. And Jabba throws bounties out for free. So that card is a 3-cost 4/3 shield, which is a very strong unit and a very good Strike True target. Jabba also enables one of the strongest turn 1 plays in the game, which is Reputable Hunter. That card is just a 2-cost 3/4 in a Jabba deck, which just really strong. And another reason why I think Strike True might be nice in this deck, because you're just going to have access to more turn 1 3 power plays. So even if your aggro opponent starts space, you can Strike True and bam, shoot that ship right out of the sky. Other place to look at with Jabba, I think, would be Mono Green if we're not going Yellow, because he is a big deploy. More ramp is good. If we can just get out like Relentlesses and Vaders and any other big stuff early, I think there is merit to that as well. Hero Boba. So Hero Boba is another mid-rangey kind of build. It's just like all your units have +1 attack, basically. Sometimes it's the unit you play, sometimes not, right? Sometimes you'll play a unit and you'll want to buff something else so that thing can attack. This is Ambush deck. I think the most natural pairing for him is Yellow. You get ambushes all up and down the curve, starting on turn 1. The only part of the curve that actually doesn't have an ambush is the 3 cost, but from then on, you can ambush in space and in ground on any part of the curve, right? At 4, you've got modded cohorts and Azutak Liberator Gunship. At 5, you've got Callus, you got Syndicate Lackeys. In space, you've got Marauder. It's probably missing 1 or 2 here. It's just that you can't even fit all of them. At 6, you've got the new Millennium Falcon. You've got Merc Company if you want to play that. You've got Enfys Nest. You've got Rogue Skirmisher. At 7, you've got Han Solo. I don't actually think there's a 7-cost spaceship that ambushes, but there is an 8-1. Forgot the name, but it's a 7-8 that also like ramps you if you defeat a unit. Basically, you look to ambush up and down the curve. I think his ability also works well with all the 2/2 shield units you can play on turn 1, Crafty Smuggler and Elite Droid. You play them. On turn 2, you play a 3-drop and you buff that shielded unit, and then that shielded unit can take out a 3-power unit, right? So that's where I think the natural pairing is. It also, because decks like this tend to struggle to control it, is also the color pair that gives you Spark of Rebellion, which is a great discard effect. You can play Bodhi and Ewing, so like you get 3-cost Bodhis even out of aspect off of the Ewing. You get Home 1s, which again can like create attrition battles into control decks. So I don't think it's completely hopeless there. It does fight mostly fair, and fair might not be good enough. But I think it might be, and like it's really strong to just ambush for +1 up and down the curve. Like the whole issue with ambush units tends to be that they're a little understated, but Boba fixes that quite well. So yeah, that's why I look at yellow. I think if you're gonna go green-red, like I think you're just playing Sabine with like Energy Conversion Lab at that point. I think ECL right now is way too good that if you're gonna be like trying to play like Poe and Wrecker, for instance, you really want that. But other than that, I think Boba has a decent chance of like fitting a certain niche, but it might be too fair, unfortunately. Bosk. So why am I interested in Bosk is really because if bounties are going to work, it better be in Bosk. Bounties overall have felt a little lacking to me. They are pretty tempo negative, they are pretty card intensive, and you often end up with the wrong half of your deck, like the bounties but not the payoffs, or the payoffs and not the bounties, or you just run out of cards real quick. Now the red 2-cost bounty that draws 2 fixed a little bit of the card running out problem, and the green bounty that plays a 3-drop that costs 1 is very, very powerful. You also get some ramp, and you get some direct damage out of your bounties. Green-red is where I would start with Bosk, although there is a chance that yellow can make an appearance, especially when we got the new 1-cost bounty event searcher. Like, you can just, it lets you pay 1 to search your deck for a bounty and play it, so you don't even lose your action. Now you do have to pay for it, so it's basically a 1 tax on whatever bounty, but it's whatever bounty, which is nice. Bosk has a good body, 4/6. His double bounty thing, when he's deployed, can really steamroll a game. Like if you can get 2 3-drops out from that, from the quarry bounty, or if you draw 4 cards, sometimes just like dealing 6 off of a guild target. If he's allowed to stick around and you can double trigger another bounty, that's usually lights out. 5-cost deploy is strong, especially when paired with green, because you can ramp. So you've got the ramp bounty and super laser tech. There's some really nice plays with Boss because he allows you to ping anything with a bounty and makes an ambush super laser tech with ECL more likely to finish off a unit, right? They play a 3 health unit, you put a bounty, you ping it, turn 2, you can ambush with super laser tech. You get the value from the bounty and you immediately ramp, which means you can deploy Boss the next turn, potentially even using that 1 resource on another bounty that same turn. So all in all, I think there's potential here. My one worry for Bosk is that the bounties themselves are a little clunky and they do suffer a little bit from like the wrong half of the deck thing. Like, oh, my hand is 3 bounties and 2 units that don't synergize with bounties, or my hand is Django Chrysanthemum and I don't have any bounties. Both can happen, or throughout the game. Like, I mean, sometimes you get some of the pieces you need and it works for a little bit, but then like you run out of what you need to do, and you're at the mercy of the top of your deck, and you draw Guild Target and the Ramp Bounty, and you got like nothing really to do for a turn. So that's the weakness I see for Bosk. All right, Han Solo. So ramp is good, we know that, and he's just ramp on a stick, similar to his bigger version in set 1. Han likes to cheat things out. At this time, he's doing it with damage instead of cards, which I think is cleaner. Now, he can't cheat out events. He can only cheat out units. And some of them are not great with 2 damage on. But a lot of them don't care, especially bigger units. Home 1 for 7, right? 7. You get a 7/5. That brings back a unit, right? Like, you can get a Crate Dragon 10/8. Like, does it matter that it has 8 instead of 10? Not really. The Rancor unit, the 6/8, that costs 6. Well, 6/6 for 5 that also deals 2 damage to everything in play. Pretty good. Being able to like double unit some turns with his ability is strong. Like, I don't love using his ability on a 2-drop, but like on turn 2, if you can go like 2-drop plus an A-Wing, right? And your A-Wing has 1 health, but like they don't have a unit in space. Does that matter that much? That can be pretty strong. In general, like his ability just kind of being free, it adds a lot of flexibility into builds for him. I do think that there's like multiple ways you can work with him. Hard aggro, I find, will probably not be the way, just because I think Sabine will do it better. But I think like aggro that also plays like interaction is a nice place to go, and that I would look at like a mono red build for that, where you get to play aggression as interaction. You can play like open fire and daring raid. I think Karabast itself is actually a really good card in Han because you've got a free enabler for it, so it can pretty consistently be a 2-cost deal 3, which is a card I think we would run in a lot of decks if we could. Han makes that happen. He also, there's the Cassian Andor unit, which on turn 1 can just be another 3/3, so that's like a Battlefield Marine. That really helps Han's consistency in the early game, just having access to a unit like that. And then, yeah, like as mono red, you'd want to probably go a little bigger than Sabine, because I don't think you can get under her, but still stay true to aggression and play to the board a lot and play to deal damage to base. You got like a lot of burn now in mono red, which I think is going to help a lot against control decks, because we've got Chaos of War now in addition to like daring raid for a cause I believe in. If you're playing enough heroic stuff, it's going to be a lot of damage from hand. Or you can go into a discard plan against control. It doesn't work with Chaos of War in the same time, right? Because Chaos of War wants them to have cards in hand. But instead of that, you can play things like Pillage and Forced Surrender and K2 and Poe, and like all of this stuff has discard. So that's a way that he can work. And another look for him, I think, is green. And I talked about like Home 1 early, but there's like a lot of big stuff, like Reinforcement Walker early is also really strong. And then in that case, you actually get to play ramp. So you can like really get this stuff down real quick. I'm not sure it's going to be good enough to fight into aggro decks, but there is a chance. And going like big green, red Han sounds exciting to me. I think that's something I'd want to test out more. And I think Crate Dragon specifically seems like a really good top end if you can get him out a couple turns early. And I don't think he cares at all if you tickle him for 2 damage first. All right, there's only one missing. Y'all know what it is by now. This is tier yes. It's Kira. She's alone. I'll talk about it now, I guess. Kira's good. So I think why this is tier yes is because she basically just slots into an already tier 1 archetype, which is villain control. Think Krennic, think Iden, specifically like the softer unit-based control decks that play a bunch of units. Those are usually green decks. So why Kira over those? Will it necessarily be Kira over those? It won't necessarily be. I think right now it's likely it will be, but I'm not like going here and saying I'm 100% certain Kira is going to surpass everything trying to do villain green control, but let's talk about it. So, first, the deploy. She's a 4/4. And I don't like 4/4s, right? We talked about Fennec. Okay, well, the thing about Kira being a 4/4 is kind of irrelevant because she's not. The point of her is not to stay in play and carry you to victory. The point of her is to flip and delete your opponent's board. She does that on deploy, right? So she's having everything's health. So why is that good? Well, because damage on your opponent's units is good. It makes trading into them much easier with units you already have in play. It makes finishing them off with cards like Overwhelming Barrage a breeze, right? Kira into Overwhelming Barrage is basically a one-sided board wipe. It makes cards like Making Opening much easier, right? All those pesky 3 health ships that you need to kill now have 2 health. They die to make an opening. She comes out so early, right? 5 deploy. It's a big bonus to Krennic. Now, she doesn't even need to use Steadfast Battalion because she deletes half the health of every leader. The only 3 leaders in the game right now that she can't trade with after flipping are Palpatine, Jabba, and Chewie. Everything else is just easy money. It makes it really awkward for your opponents to flip leaders if you haven't flipped yet. And basically, you're not flipping unless your opponent's leader has flipped in a lot of situations because, again, she's not your win condition. Think of her as a 0-cost event that just deletes the board and then trades with a unit. And I think it might start clicking a little more. On top of that, she does grow, right? Like if, for instance, you did the flip, this happens sometimes into like a Sabine or something, or even like a Boba deck if you're getting out there early. She flips, she attacks something that has 3 health. She's now a 7/1. That's dangerous, right? But it's not like mode A for her. It's not about keeping her around and utilizing her body to like win the game. It's her deploy is tremendous. Deleting half the health of everything is awesome. Now, it doesn't do much against hard control decks, but neither do Krennic and neither do Iden. So at that point, it doesn't really matter. She just comes out earlier than Iden with the same power. She comes out the same turn as Krennic with more power. So in both those cases, I'd say she's probably a little better into hard control because she's likely just going to be able to hit a little more, if at all. Where does she falter? She doesn't have any healing built into her, right? So Krennic, I think in most games, especially against Sabine, you can count on about 4 health from him. Iden, probably even more. And Kira doesn't have that. But a good way of not caring is killing your opponent's units before they attack you. That saves health, right? That's not healing, but it's damage prevention. And she does that better than either of those leaders because, again, she deletes half the health of every unit your opponent has in play. Which means you can kill them all much more quickly. And stabilize much more quickly. I would look to probably add maybe a little more healing, especially if hardcore like burn is prominent, which I think it probably will be. Like Mono Red Sabine is going to have like 4 cause, Chaos of War, Daring Raid, a bunch of reach to get through your base without needing units, which means you're going to need some healing, some consistent healing to be able to combat that. And like client is that, except if the client isn't playing, your opponent isn't playing units, he's not healing you, right? So we might need more of it out of hand. Cards like Devotion, for instance, work really well with Kira because of the 1/4 grit units. So we'll talk about now her leader side. Why is it strong? So it's not incredible, and it is taxing on your resources, but early in the game, there's the 2 1/4 grit units. One of them costs 1, which means even on turn 1, you can turn it into a 3/2 grit. The other one does cost 2, but on turn 2, you can immediately turn into a 3/2 grit and then attack with it. Those units are just more powerful in Kira than they are in most other decks. Even Krennic, who has the self buff, it does require you get the attack off, right? Which means that first attack is only hitting for 1 and doesn't do much. Now, it is action intensive, right? If you're doing it on turn 2, you can't play a 3-drop, but there are other 2-drops to play, like the 2/3 Pike Sentinel. I think that Sentinel is really good with Kira as well. It's a cheap unit that you can squeeze a shield onto. It's not about it being able to trade with other opponents' units. It's about it just delaying 2 attacks. If it can delay 2 attacks, you're going to catch up. that's the whole point of control, right? It's not about card economy early. It's about prevention, so that when you do something like flip into Barrage, you're not already at like 8 life remaining. And Pike Sentinel does that really well. So I think that and the 2 Grit units are really good targets for her shield ability early. Those Grit units carry the card Devotion exceptionally well because they turn into 4/3s with a shield. They're going to attack and kill basically anything and stay with that 3 health. Guess what? You can shield them again and turn them into 6/1s. That's still restored too. I think Devotion is probably right now, in my opinion, a main deck card for Kira because of those interactions and because of what I was talking about with healing. She does lack it, unlike Krennic and Iden. So maybe pushing a little bit more towards that will help. Now, the other stuff that her action does is think late game, right? Think we have 9-10 resources. I play Vader, I play Avenger, I play whatever big Reinforcement Walker, and then I throw a shield on it. Like, how ridiculous is that against certain decks? It's just really strong late in the game. Like, if you pair an exact, like, Kira into Iden or Kira into Krennic and play a mirror match, yeah, like, blue has removal that gets through shields, but the moment they don't have one, the game basically ends in the late game because now your Avenger has a shield or something, or your Reinforcement Walker, and their only way to kill it was going to be like a Barrage or their own Vader to ambush in, and you've turned your big units into way better versions of their big units. So I think that shield ability is going to be pretty impactful in late game states, especially if opponents don't even have access to cards like Rival's Fall, Takedown, Fell the Dragon, things that get through shields. All right, that was a lot on Kira. I just wanted to get my thoughts out on why I'm so high on this in the first place. I think naturally it's just because it also fits into a deck that I'm very high on. Krennic Green was kind of like my last dabble in set 1 where I was able to take a showdown, 1K with it, and I really like the blue-green villain archetype, and I think it's getting some nice help. And because of that, I think it's going to be pretty simple to kind of try to fit Kira into that shell with some minor tweaks to maximize her ability as much as possible. And I foresee a bright future for this leader. All right, that's what I got. Remember, early impressions, subject to change, but let me know what you think. Let me know which leaders you're excited to brew with, and which ones you might not be. And until next time, take care.